Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Theory Today. I'm Eric Garland, your host with the most here. We have a fun show today. I hope we get lots of comments, lots of questions. This is my happy place. After many years being on the beat of looking at subjects that are taboo or exotic. Like, for example, what is the role of hostile foreign intelligence services in U.S. elections, in our society, or whatever? About 10 years ago, I kind of threw the red flag about the Russians and others playing a role in Donald Trump being elected the first time. We subsequently then moved on to, hey, what's going on with all kinds of people overseas? And what's happening with some agents back home, some people that maybe are U.S. citizens, native born and all that, but don't work for the United States. Maybe they work for themselves. Maybe they work for other countries, and they're just not very healthy for the rest of us, which brings us to this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, everyone's talking about now, which is interesting. He died some 6-7 years ago after being arrested by Trump DOJ back then. And he died almost as soon as he ended up in jail there awaiting trial for sex trafficking. And now it's really getting interesting. And this week was my happy week, people, because now we're talking about Epstein. Yes, of course, his relationship to the Israelis is extremely well remarked upon. But now we're down to the Russian intelligence stuff. And that's what we're going to be discussing here today. We have so much. Hey, where's my hug at? We got so much going on. I will keep this channel open and basically as long as you want. I've got a bunch of stuff, and we could go on for years here. I'm mostly right now, I'm trying to test where everyone else is at, because I've been sitting on wild stuff for years, and you can't just whip this on people. You got to go slow. Intelligence occurs to me as I'm doing a lot more work with the Council of Competitive Intelligence professionals, fellows, I should say. I've been doing a lot more work with the fellows of recent, and we're going to be representing the intelligence profession out there. And one of the things I've been realizing is that in order for intelligence to be important, for intelligence to be effective, it has to make sense. It has to be part of a narrative that you are already bought into. Do you know what I mean? Intelligence has to be part of a story that you already understand, and then you get some more information on top of it. And then that information changes how you think. So you get it. You already have to have a narrative in mind. And then I come to you and go, okay, you thought you knew that. Okay, let's say you think you know about US-Canada relations, right? What if I tell you the Prime Minister of Canada is a werewolf? Oh, that might be true. It's not. I don't have any intelligence that says the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney or anyone else, is now or has ever been a werewolf. But let's say that was the intelligence that I had gathered. What are you going to do with that? That doesn't make any sense. I don't know what werewolves are. I don't know what werewolves in Ottawa would mean to the rest of us. So I can give you the most important, true, verified, multiple sources, assessed with high confidence that the Prime Minister of Canada is a werewolf. But if you don't know what that means and your world doesn't involve werewolves, then I can give you the best intelligence on earth, and it isn't going to mean anything to you. And in fact, you're probably going to look at me and you're going to throw me out of your office. And I don't blame you necessarily. Even though factually and methodologically, the werewolf intelligence is totally correct, and you should act on it. You should say, oh my God, the United States and Canada relationship has been affected by werewolves. But if the story doesn't accept werewolves and your decision-making set doesn't have space for werewolves, there's not much that I'm doing for you. So too with the Epstein story. because the Epstein story is now starting to tiptoe into this very interesting territory where your craziest relatives at Thanksgiving and Christmas have been living for a few years, which is maybe it is a bigger, grander conspiracy by shadowy elites who do terrible things to children. Maybe that's true. I think they call it the Overton window, which is the framework for political discussion. The Overton window is getting bigger, which I find very interesting. That our discussion about this Epstein fellow is now getting into other territory. Who is this guy? What was he up to? How many people were involved in this? Because we've now got France, we've got Belarus, we've got Norway, we've got the United Kingdom. He's not just an American problem here. So let us riff a little bit. I've got some material for you. I'll keep expanding it as far as you want to go. Maybe we'll get to Canadian werewolves. We don't know. There's lots of stuff. But first, I'm going to say hello to the nice folks who have showed up on the feed here. So first one is YouTube is Marxist. When does your $7,000 check from Bibi Netanyahu clear? I want to be very clear as to my response to that. I don't sell my country out for a mere $7,000. I'm not saying there isn't a price, but I'm saying it's well north of $7,000. But I find this fascinating. So a couple of years back, we had some trouble with some of the Israeli types in and around the 2024 election. And through a long process of nonsense, I got falsely called an anti-Semite, which I'm not. And now that I'm back to pointing at the very obvious Russian intelligence connections with Jeffrey Epstein, who also had significant connections with the Israelis. I mean, he worked with Ehud Barak, prime minister of Israel, and the former head of Israeli intelligence, because he was chief of staff of the army. He was lieutenant general, the highest rank you can have in the Israel Defense Forces. I mean, I don't think it gets much more substantial a connection between an intelligence service and a guy when you're friends with the head of their intelligence service. I mean, so, I have made comments in the past that Epstein is obviously connected to Israel at the highest levels. And now I'm being yelled at that I'm an anti-Semite, I'm not an anti-Semite. Now I'm in the pocket of the IDF because I didn't mention for like 5 seconds his connections to the Israelis, although I'm also tweeting about that. It's very Russian when you can't win, when these guys are going to hit you in the face no matter what. That if it's interesting, if you are mentioning the Israelis, they can hit you for being anti-Semitic, even though there's tons of Jewish people all over the place, and almost none of them are in the Israel intelligence services. But then if you mention the Russians, they'll hit you for not mentioning the Israelis. It almost seems like a Russian intelligence plot. It's like classic Russian disinformation to characterize the speaker, because the Russians don't want to be exposed for things that Russians love doing, which is this kind of intelligence work. So anyhow, no, I have not received any checks from Bibi Netanyahu. I probably would cash them. I just probably wouldn't do anything for them. So if there's any IDF people who want to just start sending me cash, feel free. Today's a good day, but I am more expensive. Where's my hug at? It's right here. Wow. Let's see. I don't know who this is. I mean, there's lots of people by that name. Let's see. Do we have any overt questions or comments? Neil, what up? How's it going, man? Well, we have a bunch of Jeffrey Epstein stuff in Northern Ireland with our man Neil is sitting in Belfast. So, the Epstein story is getting fascinating when it's not just Norway, Brussels, Belgium, London, and of course the United States. Now we're in places like Northern Ireland. We've got Belarusian dentists for you, but Northern Ireland is always a complicated place. So I guess there's plenty to talk about Epstein's role in messing around in Northern Ireland, where there was historically quite a bit of like Soviet intelligence activity. So plenty to discuss here. Let's see, going down through the questions. There's going to be more. I want to start out. I don't have anything on this today. Speaking of the Irish, Epstein laundering for the Kinahans. I'm not familiar with Epstein doing anything for Ireland's Kinahan cartel, which is heavily tied to the Russian mafia, hangs out a lot in Abu Dhabi and the Emirates and whatnot. I don't have anything on that, but I'm probably gonna look into it. So I just want to start with some Jeffrey Epstein Russia connection. So we know that Epstein was the heir apparent to this guy Robert Maxwell. Maxwell had a daughter named Ghislaine Maxwell, who's sitting in prison right now for sex trafficking children. Good place for her. Her dad was kind of unquestionably a spy. Robert Maxwell was a guy who went by 6 different names over his life. They say he started as Jan Ludwig Hoch from way eastern Slovakia. So if you take the map of Czechoslovakia from around the 1950s or so, all the way out in the east. So far east, in fact, that it ceased being Slovakia and then under the USSR became part of Ukraine, which is very, very convenient. Robert Maxwell was a man literally from nowhere. He was from no country at all. He just rolled up during World War II and started working more or less directly for the British intelligence services, and then immediately had an entree into the Soviet Union, where he did all sorts of things. But okay, Jeffrey Epstein was hanging around with a lot of scientists, right? He was hanging out with guys from MIT, guys from Harvard. He loved to have a power center somewhere people were doing like scientific research. He gets his Zorro ranch out in New Mexico, and that's right near Los Alamos National Labs. He loves hanging out with scientific folks. Well, what is one of the potential reasons for that? His mentor, Robert Maxwell here, had a deal in the 1950s with the Soviet Union where he got paid millions of dollars to publish Russian scientific research after Sputnik was launched. So after the Soviets took the lead in the space race, Maxwell, this guy who kept changing names and turns up working for the Brits, and then he launches a scientific publishing company, does academic publishing, and he was commercializing publication all this scientific research in Japan and South America, wherever. But he had the deal with the Russian Academy of Sciences for their journals in the 50s and during Stalin. So yeah, he had interest in all of these places. I went to Japan, he had an American man off there. I went to India, there was someone there. The international markets could be extremely lucrative. Ronald Sluleski, who ran Pergamon's Japanese office in the Saudi, told me Japanese scientific societies, desperate to get their work published in English, gave Maxwell the rights to their members' results for free. It's interesting. Wherever he went, Robert Maxwell got all these free deals, even though that's not really how most business works. They don't just give you stuff for free around the world. Sometimes there is an economic benefit to exposure. Though I'm in Vermont and I'm from Vermont. Around here, people die from exposure. So we don't like hearing things are free because exposure is good. Exposure is death. But so this is where Robert Maxwell started. Selling off Soviet research. Right? And Jeffrey Epstein learned at the knee supposedly, of the Maxwells, and he got in with the daughter. And after he dies in 1991, Ghislaine goes and moves to New York and starts working with Epstein. Some years ago on the program Narrative with Zev Shalev, I did an interview with Steve Hoffenberg, who was Jeffrey Epstein's business partner. And he said that Hoffenberg said that Epstein was trained by the Maxwell family to be spies. And Hoffenberg said before his untimely death that he was offered to become a spy in the way that they were, and he turned it down. He just wanted to be a criminal, more or less. Let's see. Hold on. We have some comments. Mother Teresa took money from Robert Maxwell and the Duvaliers. Durfee 13. I did not know that I know that Mother Teresa had a very interesting banking profile, that she moved other people's money around. It's not my area of expertise. That she had to deal with Maxwell is pretty fascinating. She was Albanian, of course, but she made it around the world, Calcutta. That has a certain USSR flavor to it back in the day. I gotta look it up. I find that pretty interesting. And the Duvaliers, I'm not aware of that one either, but I'm assuming you mean Papa Doc, Baby Doc Duvalier in Haiti, which certainly keeps with the Soviet theme from back in the day. That's a rumor. I don't have any. I can't speak to that, but it sounds about right. I love when you show receipts. I'm in intelligence. That's what we're supposed to do. And I am not showing you that many receipts. Not that many. There are, when you're doing real intelligence, you're talking about thousands upon thousands of receipts. And that's what's in the back room here on this Epstein fellow. I mean, let me tell you, you do not own homes in this many places. You do not have this many bank accounts. You don't have, deals set up shorting the ruble upon the invasion of Crimea, and you don't have deals where you're setting up to meet with Russian ambassadors without there being thousands upon thousands of receipts. I've heard from good sources that Epstein was a Russian agent of one form or another. I think you will find that once you start looking for it, there is, even in the unclassified world, an enormous amount of evidence that's out there. And I use evidence in the general sense, not in the court-ready sense, because they're different. But that we're finally discussing this, I think the Epstein-Russia story needs to be dealt with a lot more carefully than the Trump-Russia story was, because the Trump-Russia story was very, very potent. As in, there were a lot of Russian agents around Donald Trump in 2016. The question was he one of them? Was he on their payroll? I think there was a lot of assumptions made. I made them because he was so surrounded by these guys. I have new questions. I think I may have been wrong about some of my conclusions, not others. That Paul Manafort was on the payroll for Vladimir Putin, I'm not confused about. That the Mercers dumping money into Cambridge Analytica and Steve Bannon, that they were working for Russian interests. I think that's absolutely true. And I think that led to Trump being president. The question that is coming up, and you're going to see it in the grand juries that are impaneled in Florida on the Steele dossier stuff. Some of the questions here are, was Trump in on it? Was he a victim of some of this? Was he a co-conspirator? Or, was he an informant? Was he really working with the FBI the whole time? Which, man, that would have been a very low probability, high impact scenario. I didn't consider it all that much, but, I am considering it a lot more now. But I think there was a culture that came up around the Trump-Russia years, 10 years ago. Particularly people that were not intelligence professionals, the way I am and the way some others are, they came in and they started throwing around some big assumptions and some conclusions. And worse yet, you had guys from the CIA who were stepping out into public, only half telling the story. Some of those are the guys that are sitting and their names are before a grand jury in Florida as we speak. And the reason I was running my yap at great personal expense, by the way, 10 years ago, was because I assumed that the guys from the CIA couldn't possibly run their jaws. And then they were behind the scenes in ways that affected the elections. So I think now that we get into Epstein and Russia, I think it's a really useful thing. But we got to be careful. I want to reintroduce rigor into all this and bring as many receipts as possible. So I'm glad that is something that the audience appreciates, because that's how we roll. I think we are discussing the Epstein-Russia story right now because there's, really ample information about it. Let me throw up another just kind of fun fact. This is not smoking gun, but it's certainly pretty interesting. Meet Igor Zinoviev. He was, I believe, a USSR born. If not, I don't know if he's ethnically Russian. Some of these guys, a lot of the UFC dudes are Chechen. Some of these dudes are born to different parents, different ethnicities in different parts of the former Soviet Union. So I forget where Igor here was born, but he's essentially a Russian UFC fighter. And he was Jeffrey Epstein's bodyguard while he got his cushy deal from the Florida prosecutor's office there. That's just one data point. Like, why would you have a Russian guy around you? There's a lot of tough dudes. There's a lot of dudes who box. There's a lot of dudes who kickbox and can do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Greco-Roman wrestling. I mean, there are plenty of former soldiers. Why would you want a Russian dude? I don't know. We're gonna take that one down. That could just be innuendo. We don't want to be into ethnic intolerance here. That there's there's a Russian involved. So what? There's lots of Russians, and that's true. Now, 2009, this young woman, Karina Shuliak, a Belarusian woman, is brought to the United States in 2009. She goes on to become a dentist. Remember that they had a big dentist chair at Little St. James Island. And Jeffrey Epstein apparently left her $100 million in his will, and the deeds to a lot of these properties. And no doubt she's great, right? Belarus is a very specific country, though. It's not Russia. It's not Russia, but its dictator is as close to Vladimir Putin as you can possibly get. And their intelligence service is called the KGB. Like, they didn't even change the name. Belarus is, of course, means white Russia, right? So the land of the white Russians. Okay. The intelligence service is still called the KGB. And Miss Shuliak comes into our country in the year 2009. She's 20 years old. I think he's still Jeffrey Epstein here is still in prison in Florida, where he's being overseen by Mr. Zinoviev every day, who's watching his back. And at some point, he meets Karina Shuliak, or maybe he placed an order for her and she showed up DoorDash style. These are human traffickers. And so she shows up from Belarus, and that's who he wants to give a 9-digit number to. So this is known as like corroboration. So we've got the Russian bodyguard. We've got Ghislaine Maxwell's dad had very early publishing deals with the Soviet Union when it was run by Joseph Stalin. when Jeffrey is thinking about the future, he gets with this woman. It's not clear if they're married or not, but he hooks up with a Belarusian who he wants to leave all of his assets to, a woman from a country that has an intelligence service that's still called the KGB. I was sent this earlier today by an intrepid reader. It's a 2020 deposition from a man named James Hatt. James Hatt was testifying about the relationship that he had with both Epstein and the Maxwells. In 1993, Hatt went to his house in Chelsea, introduced Hatt to Kevin Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell. Kevin inherited from his father connections with the USSR and Russia. The UK government agreed to meet. Grigory Lukhansky owned a company called Novex in Vienna. Then you get this company, Novex. Money needed to appear from two places. They were to utilize the services of a man, Jeffrey Epstein, out of New York, who Kevin had known for a number of years, Kevin being Maxwell, Ghislaine's brother. The money would come back into Europe. Gary said that unless the issue could be resolved, there'd be no transaction in Latvia, former Soviet Union. Kevin and the UK government were very interested in Lukhansky. UK authorities believed that Robert Maxwell and Kevin had hidden a great deal of money somewhere in the world, possibly Bulgaria, Russia, or satellite states. So, when you go into just a little bit of what the Maxwell family is up to, of course, there's Isabel and Kevin and Ghislaine. They've a bunch of siblings, and they're all involved in cybersecurity or publishing scientific research, or if you're Ghislaine, you're going to summer camps for the elite, like up at Interlochen in Michigan with Jeffrey Epstein, which she was doing in the 90s, and trying to meet vulnerable young teenagers who they can give scholarships to and involve them in this network of other gross stuff where they can be traded off to other people to spend time with these other rich, this is what's being exposed right now. But you start scratching the surface and, what was the Maxwell family's real deal here? I mean, we don't have time to get into everything Robert Maxwell got up to with publishing tabloids in Britain or running the pension funds thereof, and his relationship with various Soviet premiers. But bottom line, there's a whole lot of Russia up in here. And you may remember at one point, the Russians were considered our main adversary. And then in the 90s and 2000s, the general belief was that the United States beat Russia in the Cold War and that Russia lost. Russia lost and then turned around and took control of our mafias that had been largely Italian and Israeli in different parts, and they had taken control of them because their mafias were linked up with spies. They had melted down the KGB, melted down their mafias, and weaponized them against ours. And then they start investing in our tech companies and the NRA and things like that. And turns out we didn't really win the Cold War. So a whole lot of Russia going on here. So I'm going to check your questions, see how we're doing on that. Eric, how could the government have all this info on Trump and he was still able to become president? We're not talking about Trump too much here today. But did so Epstein, we know now, had a very intense relationship with this guy, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was Donald Trump's campaign manager after Paul Manafort was blown out of the water because his relationship with Putin was just so intense that everyone was discussing it. They slip in Bannon, who was taking his financing from the Mercers, who were getting their money from Russia. I don't know. It's why I wrote I wrote a thread December 2016 saying, hey, this Trump guy has a lot of connections to Russia. How the hell could this guy becoming president? And, there were other people who were very worried about that too. How could the government have all this info on a candidate and they're able to become president? Because we do not have our counterintelligence institutions able legally to say you have too many connections to hostile foreign intelligence. I mean, everybody had some, going all the way back to George Washington. Now, he was probably the purist, right? But everything those early presidents were doing, they were worried about spies. French, British, Spanish, Portuguese, anyone. They thought the United States was young, tender, fragile, and were extremely susceptible to hostile foreign intelligence activity. And yet we wanted freedom here. So I think you can look, every potential candidate has had hostile foreign intelligence ties. Go back to Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr had a lot of British ties. He went back to England after his defeat. He was a traitor. I believe Aaron Burr sided up with the British during the War of 1812, something thereabouts. He was allowed to run. That's how long this goes back. We don't have a mechanism that says you have too many influences from hostile foreign intelligence. Should we? It's probably a good question. But it wasn't anybody's job to stop Trump from running. And moreover, the guys that have tried to get involved, what we're seeing about John Brennan, Jim Clapper, and others in the intelligence community who were behind the scenes using very weak, if not corrupted, intelligence methodology in order to arrive at a conclusion that that Trump was compromised by the Russians. Their actions against Trump and his incoming administration turn out to be very, very inappropriate, very troublesome upon review, I think. The reason I was running my yap to begin with was I assumed that nobody at that level could really even discuss these things in public. Turned out that they were leaking to the media in real time. And that was pretty tough. So how could we have this information? We do not have a conduit between counterintelligence and politics. Probably for the best. Do we want to avoid this situation of this much intrigue? Yeah, we do. This has been a lot of trouble. Dervy 13 says, Maxwell, quote, fell off his yacht, question mark, question mark. I don't have anything to add. I just like that. I think that's correct. Maxwell fell off his yacht suddenly as the Soviet Union collapsed. Supposedly buried on the Mountain of Olives or whatnot in Israel. It's a mystery, right? But I like it. It's in quotes. It's got question marks. It's not a definitive statement. That's how I put it. How did the CIA and Julius Caesar 4176 says, how did the CIA and FBI not know about Epstein, and why didn't they shut him down decades ago? Aha! That is a great question. Let's get into it. Did the CIA know about Jeffrey Epstein? Well, the CIA starts in the interior of the country and looks outward to gather its intelligence. They're a human intelligence network. They are there to get other people to betray their country for us. Ostensibly because we're the good guys, and hopefully they are working for a regime that is full of bad guys. Might be Pakistan, might be Iran, might be whoever. We go, hey, do you believe in democracy? We believe in democracy. Intelligence officers go out, they spot, assess, develop, try and recruit up human intelligence sources. Very, very sensitive process. So the CIA, it's not their job to know about Epstein when he's on U.S. soil. Now, the Epstein has all these deals with various Russian figures, various international figures, they can run into him out there. Why didn't the CIA shut Epstein down? Well, it's not their job to shut anybody down. Pardon me. It's not their job to shut anyone down on U.S. soil. The CIA's job is to shut things down away from U.S. soil. Why did the FBI not shut Epstein down? Now, that's a great question. Both the state and the feds were looking at Epstein in Florida in the mid-2000s. The FBI no doubt investigated. And the statement that is attributed to Alex Acosta, former Secretary of Labor, who before that was the prosecutor overseeing Jeffrey Epstein's case, it is attributed to him that Epstein belongs to intelligence. But that story never came out until like 2019. And I don't believe Acosta has directly, I don't believe he is owned up to that statement. So that may be wishful thinking of why it was shut down. But the FBI no doubt knew about Epstein and Maxwell. The FBI, now it's been very well covered that the FBI trailed Robert Maxwell wherever he went in this country because he's obviously a spy for another country. He's not American. He lived in Britain. He's not really even British. He's a mystery man from Mystery Village in eastern Slovakia / Lithuania / Latvia, wherever. Supposedly southwestern Ukraine now. So they trailed him wherever he was going because he was trafficking technology and he was a spy. So the FBI knew about Jeffrey Epstein. Why didn't they shut him down? Well, counterintelligence investigations, the goal of them is to neutralize a threat, not necessarily prosecute, because prosecution involves putting evidence before a jury, grand jury or a total jury, or a trial court jury. Whereas we know things through intelligence that we don't necessarily want to put in front of regular people, and we just want to shut the guy down. Now, in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, was a monstrous criminal, just laundering money all over the place and abusing children. Those are criminal acts. Sometimes we will preference national security investigations over shutting down a criminal. Happens all the time. Why didn't we do that with Epstein? I think that's the big question here. Why didn't we? Why did we allow this predator on our soil for so long? And I think some of the question there, the real answer to it, is that this guy's job was to compromise our elites and other countries' elites. So he had a network, and other people like him had a network of influential individuals who were all part of the same criminal network. And they were using the mechanisms of their various democracies to enrich themselves, to continue abusing other human beings, to do all these things. Maybe it was ideological and they were trying to overthrow democracy around the world. I'm not sure. But if you're talking about a guy who collected super influential people throughout the media, academia, politicians, and we were getting evidence that is who Epstein had, then they didn't shut him down, most likely because there were all of his co-conspirators throughout these institutions. A slow boil of corruption, insidious penetration of our institutions. I think that's why this has gotten so serious and so dangerous, is because Epstein was not just one guy. He was the visible part of the Hydra that was everywhere. So looks like the FBI is doing a pretty good job shutting all this down now. I have a comment that I'm looking at that is not that is not directly relevant, I don't think, to the Epstein-Russia story, but it's too good. The Mini Mocha says, the movie Elizabeth was set in the early 1500s. Much of it was spies, France and Spain. So the Elizabeth movies are some of my favorite. And hold on, I gotta throw up a picture of my man Sir Francis Walsingham. Jeffrey. Just take a second here. I got to throw a picture of my patron saint here. So the movie Elizabeth, one of the main characters in that is Sir Francis Walsingham, who is Elizabeth's spy master, and yes, absolutely was trying to catch and neutralize the spy networks from Catholic Spain in particular. Gets caught in his own web. Totally, historically, completely inaccurate. Those movies are all chronologically out of order. They attribute certain actions to different people at different times. It's a mess. However, they're amazing films, and the most enduring relationship is between the sovereign, Elizabeth, and her spy chief, played wonderfully by Jeffrey Rush. So if you're in the intelligence services, he is the patron. He is the patron saint. He's the godfather here, because he's the one who not only tried to protect England as the kingdom, he tried to protect the sovereign, and did so with with kind of ruthless efficiency. It was not of torture, which we don't do that anymore. But England was in a very fragile position at the time, and everyone wanted to take advantage of the Virgin Queen, who was unlike any other monarch. And you had these international networks that were coordinated by the Vatican, which some things never go out of style. And he helped navigate that. So, Minnie Mocha, God bless you for letting me talk about Sir Francis Walsingham. Otherwise, oops, we got more. Mairie of Guise, the region of Scotland, and allied with France against England. Spying, poisoning, murders, key features of the time. Yes, you kill a queen. All queens are mortal. All that stuff. So, but we're not doing a live tweet of that movie. I would do a live tweet of that movie, but it'd be mostly me fanboying out over something that's not historically super accurate, but it is certainly fun. So let's see what other tidbits do we have for the Epstein Russia story. We've got the Russian bodyguard. We've got the Belarusian dentist. The money. A few months back, we got some in the initial cut of the Epstein files, which every cut gets even better and better. Here, I couldn't help but notice this was in, I believe, a summary of suspicious activity reports. That's what SAR stands for on this. The suspicious activity reports means somebody at a bank saw something that seemed kind of weird. And I believe that what you're looking at here are reports about Jeffrey Epstein's transfers to Sberbank in the Russian Federation. Andrei Genadovich Zelinsky. So this is a report. It's not been corroborated to my knowledge, but this was somebody at a bank said, "Whoa, Epstein is sending money to a sanctioned Russian institution sometime after Crimea." I forget if Sberbank was in fact sanctioned at that very moment. But there's one thing's to be sure, when your friends run Harvard, and when you are with all these scientists who work with the US government, the more deals you do with the Russians, the less you can be trusted. Like, the Russians have been dodgy here for a good solid century. It has been a long time since there was nothing noteworthy about doing business with the Russian Federation. Epstein's money was tied up with these guys in some ways. all throughout here. And, this is before I tread through some of the territory that Mike Benz, a right-wing influencer, is doing some very interesting streams about Epstein's time at Bear Stearns in the 70s, where he was apparently moving money for BCCI, which was a very notorious bank that moved money for some of the more controversial CIA operations. I don't really know how Mike knows that stuff. I know it through, well, I just did. So Epstein's had some very interesting monetary behavior for a long, long time. And, now this is coming out in more detail here. Let's get a couple, let's throw another couple of receipts in here. We had some receipts of Epstein in the year 2016, talking to Vitaly Churkin, who was, I believe, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. And he was getting, you see the comment here, any Maxim help is confidential. Spasibo you, greatly appreciated. He's a great son. So Vitaly Churkin's son was named Maxim. And Maxim was hanging out with some of Epstein's girls, and this is on the run up to Trump becoming president. There was a lot of Epstein contact with the Russian ambassador to the UN. And this is a communication from Leslie Groff, who was Epstein's assistant, talking to someone else. It's not clear. But she says on October 5th, 2016, Jeffrey has an important lunch on Friday with Peter Thiel and Vitaly Churkin. I will get back to you, blah, blah, blah. So October of 2016, let me tell you, that was, in terms of counterintelligence, that was a hot month. That was the month before Trump was elected. That's around the time that WikiLeaks was intervening in our election, dumping hacked information, however they got it. Was it the GRU that hacked the Democratic National Committee? Was it an insider? Personally, I think it's the latter. I think they had an inside help, but how do we know that inside help didn't work for the group? We don't know that. But Peter Thiel was very important there. He had supported the candidacy of one Josh Hawley in Missouri to become Attorney General. He's now the senior senator from Missouri. But back then, Peter Thiel was supporting him. Meanwhile, Thiel was apparently meeting with Jeffrey Epstein and Vitaly Churkin. A lot going on there, guys, right? And I have to say, I'm liking what Josh Hawley is up to. He's doing things like helping out, I think it's RECA. He's helping out the remediation of radioactive waste in St. Louis and other parts of Missouri that has been sickening people since the Manhattan Project. He's done incredible things, finally getting those people compensated and helping end a terrible situation that was being used in different ways to blackmail the U.S. government. Hawley's also going hard in the paint against child traffickers, particularly those using child slave labor. And, it's not the Hawley I remember, who was doing the Hobby Lobby stuff. I'm very impressed with a lot of his work of late and quite supportive. You might be surprised to know. But 10 years ago, he was supported by Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel was spending his afternoons hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein and the Russian ambassador. So I had a lot of questions about Joshua. But now the esteemed Senator Hawley, I have many fewer questions about. People change, they grow. Hyper Smooth asks, do we know what happened to the vast videotape library of Epstein? Nope. Do we know that it was a videotape library? Do we know whether or not it was live broadcast on a shortwave radio to some country? We don't. I don't know any of that. When I talk about gazillions of receipts, real counterintelligence stuff, one of the things that like a real counterintelligence um, operation will have is the ability to monitor signals and the ability to flip some of the agents that are working with those guys and find out exactly how they're talking with each other, how they're talking with their home base. All of that is as heavily classified as you can make it because you want to protect how we are getting inside their operations. This is the real spy versus spy. I will bet there is somebody that knows what happened with all of these records that were created. Do we know in the open source? We do not. Am I interested? Hell yes, I'm interested. I'm very interested. There's that picture. I don't really want to put it up. There's that picture of Prince Andrew lurking over on the floor. There looks to be somebody who's like 11 years old that he's over the top of. And that's the kind of thing when you talk about compromising images, that's what you're talking about. And of course, far worse. The whole point of these exercises is to create these images, get people acting in ways that they might act normally or they wouldn't otherwise act normally. You apply them with drugs, alcohol, or whatever, and you get them doing something that you can then that you can then use to convince them to do things that they may or may not have done otherwise. Is that what Epstein was in the business of? Among many other things. I think when you put Epstein in the context of a Russian officer, Russian intelligence officer, and I don't think he was trained in the Soviet Union or anything. But if you compare him with a KGB officer, he does a lot of the same things. He spots people, he assesses them, he recruits them up to be weaponized in different ways. He's sort of indistinguishable from a KGB guy, or a Mossad guy, or MIT in Turkey, or whoever. This kind of spycraft is well known throughout the world. But one thing's for sure, he is not a law-abiding guy, and he wasn't working for the benefit of the United States. He was a traitor. Was he a traitor who worked for Russia? Hell yes. Obviously, he was working in their benefit. Just like his father-in-law before him, helping them spread their influence around, hide their money. I mean, I think there's no question Jeffrey Epstein is a Russian agent. He's also an Israeli agent, a hostile one. He's also some other things. And he's dead, we assume, which is good, I'm sure. But his operations were so vast and so nasty that they need us to pay attention finally and go, okay, what was happening here? And who went along with it? Who hung out with this guy anyhow? Because in 2007, 8, 9, it was made clear to the world that he was a monster towards children, among others. And people still hung out with him because they thought he could do something for them. It behooves us as civilized people. We need to understand exactly what that entire social dynamic was. Not just this one guy, because he's dead. But we need to understand why the producer from the television show Bones was talking about, hiring different people and talking to Epstein about it. And he's apologized for his lack of judgment. But I think that's horseshit. I think these people knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that Jeffrey Epstein was a horrible guy who could get you what you wanted. He was powerful. And in this world where the powerful get what they want, and they will hurt you if you're in their way, a lot of people concluded, maybe not incorrectly, you better be on their side or you're going to get hurt. I'm somebody who has gotten in their way and gotten hurt grievously. So I know what I'm talking about. So some people made different choices. They're like, no, I'm not going to sacrifice big chunks of my life or my entire life. I'm going to go along with them because I have things that I want to do that do not involve getting, run over by a steamroller by these guys, and that's fine. I understand why they made their decision. Self-interest does not take a whole lot of, sleuthing to understand why people acted in their own interest. But now we need to go back through and understand everybody and why they acted in this way and get a full list and for everyone to take full responsibility for hanging out with this guy. And man, I guess Gillen is going to show up in public and testify on Monday. She's reportedly going to plead her Fifth Amendment rights to avoid self-incrimination, which means she knows she's committed more crimes. Who knows? Maybe she's going to run her yap on Monday. That'd be fun. So which team is Bannon? Maxime 934. Which team is Bannon? Well, I think Team Bannon is Bannon for one. He's a contractor. I think Bannon very clearly worked with Epstein, so he's Team Child Trafficker. He worked trying to overthrow democracies throughout Europe. It's very Russian. He hung out with Guo Wengi, aka Miles Kwok, so he's basically he's a Chinese agent as well. So I think Bannon is Team Fascism, and he appears to work for the Russians and Chinese, and his influence has yet to fully be understood. So Bannon is on Team Shithead. So I don't like him much. I'm very much looking forward to bad things happening to Steve Bannon. He knows who I am, put it that way. So Steve, I know where you are. We'll see you soon, buddy. And by the way, thank all of you for being here. It is great to see everybody here. It is great to see the questions. Couldn't do it without you. And this is all very interesting. And thank you. Let's see. Thank you for your work. No problem. Thank you for being here. Middle East Eye has an article about Epstein and Dershowitz. Yes, Alan Dershowitz, Harvard's most preeminent constitutional law professor, was Epstein's attorney and continues to have a deleterious effect on American society, and defended Trump in the first impeachment trial. And all of that deserves more understanding. I wonder what we're going to learn about Mr. Dershowitz. I mean, the fact that he hung out with a child trafficker doesn't speak very highly of him. I'd say it's pretty obvious that he's a bad guy. What does that mean for Harvard? What does that mean to everybody that thought that he was a legitimate voice when it came to constitutional law? Not my problem, but it needs discussion. Jenny B says, Bannon has his paws in everything around 2008 and crypto. Yeah, so people are starting to connect Bannon and Epstein to cryptocurrency in general, and digital operations, especially like recruiting up young men on right-wing, or not necessarily on right-wing sites, but going to Reddit and Discord and video games and all this, and profiling particularly young men to be weaponized as part of these right-wing operations. Yeah, that's where Bannon is deeply embedded. Feels very Russian, feels very Chinese. So it's funny. Trump's DOJ has gone really light on Bannon. And I think the other day Trump put up a thing. It was a picture of Bannon, and after Bannon spent like an entire weekend getting torched in the Epstein files, Trump tweets out or truths out or whatever that Bannon and Navarro are bigger than ever. He didn't say better than ever. He didn't say, boy, America couldn't do it without them. They just said they're bigger than ever. Sometimes I think that old. I think a lot of people call Trump an idiot. I think the man is not an idiot, and I think he plays a very subtle game here. And I think Trump was being run by these guys. You see the disrespect that Bannon and Epstein had for Trump in 2018. Epstein's dead and Bannon's been to prison and may be back soon. I think a lot of people were taking advantage of Donald Trump in 2017 through 2021. And I think the shoe is on the other foot now. I hope Steve Bannon had a good time, because I don't think his future is all that bright, personally. Daily cost running article, Republican predators and enablers on part 60, currently over 1,500. I have to say, with regards to the partisan nature of this, Epstein had a huge power base amongst the Democrats, particularly amongst the Clinton family. He also had plenty of Republican help as well. He had people from around the world. Look, I'm going to take this from an intelligence perspective. I think a lot of partisanship is a puppet show that's designed to keep us from talking to each other. So whether Epstein had Republican enablers or Democratic enablers, clearly he had both. And I think both of our political parties have tons of problems, particularly with this stuff. So let us just hope that everybody that's been doing bad stuff gets lit up for it. I'm going to throw some more receipts up here onto the stage. There was a report that kicked off this renaissance in discussing the Russian the Russian relationship to Epstein here. Donald Tusk in Poland all of a sudden announces Epstein was probably a Russian spy, which I think is true, right? Poland to examine an increasingly likely possibility that the pedophilia scandal was co-organized, ooh, very subtle, co-organized by intelligence services in Moscow. And you got the hat here. The hat's great. You put a fur hat on somebody, they look more than vaguely Russian. The Polish would know. The Polish are laced throughout with tons of Russian agents. They have a very intimate relationship with the Russian Federation year over year. It seems like we're going to go at some of the deeper levels of infiltration by Russian intelligence services. So it seemed well-timed that the Polish are like, no, this Epstein guy, he had an effect on our country too, and it's very Russian. I don't think Epstein spent a lot of time in Poland. I haven't heard that he did. So if he was compromising various Polish figures, then then it was probably part of a bigger operation, and that bigger operation was probably quite Russian in nature. So I think they're in a good position to discuss that. And there are other countries that are having some real issues here. Torbjörn Jagland, I think I'm saying that correctly. Torbjörn Jagland, who former Prime Minister of Norway. Anyhow, he was working with Jeffrey Epstein to introduce him to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. And I guess Jagland is part of the committee that hands out the Nobel Peace Prizes. And he was kind of notoriously pro-KGB from all the way back in his younger days. We haven't even talked about Mandelson in regards to this. But then again, Mandelson's part of the broader Epstein scandal, not the Russian scandal specifically. But you have yet another country here. So we had the Poles. Now we've got the Norwegians, and they're hooking people up with the Russians. And there's Epstein. So you see the corroboration starts to build up after a while. It's not just one thing. It's not just the Russian bodyguard. It's not just the giant backstory of the Maxwell family, which is just USSR and Russia from front to back. It's also having lunch with Vitaly Churkin and Peter Thiel at the same time. It's the Norwegians hooking them up with Sergei Lavrov. It's the Belarusian dentist. It's boom, boom, boom. After a while, it's pretty clear that Epstein was working around a lot of Russians, and he was doing all the Russians' favorite stuff: laundering money, compromising politicians, and attacking Western democracy. So does that make him a Russian agent? Yes, it does. That makes him a Russian agent. There's really no question here. I've actually been been targeted by a Russian intelligence officer, the wonderful Don Heathfield, Andrei Bezrukov, who is the top of his game. I feel like I played basketball against LeBron James or something. He pretended to be Canadian. I bought it like an idiot, even though his French accent should have been similar to the one I'm near here in Vermont. He was actually trained by the Russian military and extremely well at that. He got caught in 2010 and sent back home. He was a real Russian and welcomed, given medals. He's now in the Valdai Discussion Club, all that good stuff. Epstein does not appear to be him. He's not a Russian citizen that we know. He's not he was not trained as an intelligence officer by the Russians per se. In other words, he doesn't, under that shirt, he doesn't have on a Russian jersey with his name and number on the back. But it doesn't matter. He does Russian intelligence stuff around Russians in ways that Russians love. And that basically makes him a Russian spy. Is he an Israeli spy too? Yeah, probably. He worked with Ehud Barak. And Ehud Barak, in the most recent drop of the Epstein files, they've got audio of Epstein and Barak talking about how Israel needs to import another 1 million Russians. So basically it's more Russian. So is Ehud Barak really a Russian agent and not really an Israeli? Well, Netanyahu kind of said, you can tell that Epstein didn't really work for Israel because he was with Barak, which is interesting because Ehud Barak was prime minister. He was head of the IDF. But I think what Netanyahu is saying is Ehud Barak was not a loyal Israeli. Ehud Barak was really working for Putin. I think there's at least some evidence that we've heard in the unclassified dump of this. Fascinating stuff here. So I don't know about you, but the fact that Epstein is a Russian spy seems more and more inescapable, not just likely, not just probable. Yeah, he worked for the Russians in a number of ways. Now, how inconvenient is that for Katie Couric, George Stephanopoulos, and all of them who were over at his house in 2010 when he got out of prison? It's pretty bad. You have all these people who work in academia, media, politics, finance, who worked around Epstein, went to all the parties with Ghislaine Maxwell. They're Russian spies. We got to talk about it. We have been holding this back for years now. And a guy like me comes out in 2016, I go, hey, we need to talk about the Russians. And man, they hit me in the face with as many wrenches as they could. That was pretty hard to survive, I have to tell you. And nevertheless, here we are. We go and talk about it. You can't be working with that many Russians without us talking about it. So there we go. I'm going to take a few more questions here and see what you all are thinking about this. This is fun. You guys are all up on Saturday, which I appreciate. Let's see. It's not a DIS 2666 says it's not about Dem rep. It's about shitty men ruining the world for their debauchery and power. It's also about shitty women, but otherwise I agree with you. This is just about bad behavior, people that want to get ahead by abusing people. And this is an anti-shithead operation. I agree. After the James Munoz 3209, after the Washington Post debacle, can corporate media be saved? No, it can't. When you get on to how much bad that the corporate media has gotten up to here, and just how much they haven't done their jobs, like they don't tell us what we need to know, and they very clearly serve the big bags of money that are behind them, and they don't serve the rest of the democracy. And everybody loves to say, "Oh, I'm a journalist," when they commit espionage, or even when the thing with Don Lemon the other day, where they're running into this church to scream at people who are busy worshiping. Like, oh, well, we're journalists. This is terrible. No, I have absolutely no respect for journalists. Sorry. These are people that don't have any rigor in their methodology. I met some people 25 years ago who did, who would sit down for coffee with you and get out their notepad. And I remember one gentleman who a fair interview about me. Back when I was just a simple intelligence professional. And he takes out his takes out his pen and his paper, and goes, okay, now we're going to do an interview. And so we did an interview on the subject that he called me to discuss. And then when I read the thing in print, he called me and asked for quotes to make sure it was exactly what I said before it went to print. And then when it went to print, I didn't have the feeling that I needed to sue him because he was a real journalist. But let me tell you, they have gotten rid of those people 25 years ago, especially after the financial crisis, but definitely before as well. So yeah, they got rid of 1/3 of the Washington Post. Nothing of value was lost. You know, corporate media cannot be saved. So I can't wait for them all to go out of business. Then we can all organize online and see who's good at telling stories and who's good at organizing their research so that they can show their receipts, if you will, who can bring, extrinsic evidence to bear on a discussion. Who can do that well? It's not the corporate media. Somebody needs to do it for us because everybody has like real jobs they have to go do all day. So, and I think I think Epstein's network leading to the highest levels of some of these journalistic enterprises, I think everyone will want them to go out of business soon enough. One is the actual end game. I'm assuming you mean what is the actual end game? Impeachment. I do not think, I think there's no cause to impeach Donald Trump at this point. It's already happened twice, and it's very tiresome. I'm not above impeachment for people in the future, but I think certainly in this administration, there is nothing that Trump is doing other than exercising executive power in a way that a lot of people don't like. But I am reading the opinions of the 4th Circuit, 9th Circuit, DC Circuit, 11th Circuit, for this no king stuff. Oh, he's acting like a dictator. Boy, he depends on his DOJ litigators to go out and lay out coherent arguments, some of which he loses, some of which the Trump administration loses in court, fair and square. And sometimes they're overturned. Sometimes the trial court is reversed and remanded. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court intervenes on Trump's side. Sometimes it doesn't. In other words, the system is functioning in some ways better than it has in a while. So I don't think that the end game of this is impeachment. I think with regards to Epstein and them, it's exposure. We're gonna find out who worked with this. Can't miss it. He was convicted in 2008 of being a child trafficker. And for everybody out there who wants to go, well, technically that was illicit of a minor. If you are moving minors from one place to another, even within the same town, to do nasty things to them, that's trafficking. Smuggling is moving someone across a border. Trafficking is moving them from A to B in order to make money off them illicitly. So Epstein was a trafficker in 2008. Everybody knew it, and everybody still went to his house for lasagna, or I think as Katie Couric called it, rockin' lasagna. And they can all own up for their complimenting that man's lasagna. If you want good Italian food, come to my house. There's no child trafficking around here. My red sauce, I guarantee, is better. Random question. What does the term shadow government mean? Very interesting point. Is there a government behind the government that we think we have? I think yes. I think to a degree there's going to be networks of influence that we don't see. That's not necessarily toxic, not necessarily cause for alarm. And Trump and others use the term deep state. I've used it too, but not necessarily in a bad way. But the idea that there's a real government behind the one we think we have, I think that particularly applies to like court corruption. If the judges are already compromised and are going to make decisions on the law, that's essentially a shadow government that exists outside of our declared government. I think that's a real problem. But the idea of a shadow government is somebody who's there pulling the strings, in a way that's actually impactful, in a way that we would assume otherwise that our elected officials are acting. Is that going on? I think that's the whole point of Epstein. I think the whole point of the Epstein network is for there to be a group inside the government that is actually doing something that they want and not something that you want. I think that's what's being exposed. That's a very important point there. What about NATO, Eric? Jeffrey Epstein was living in Paris. The French news about him being a Russian spy is very weak. We are goatscaping Jacques Lang, but there is much more. Macron's circle met with Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, I of course started my career in Paris in '95. I keep a close eye on that. I think Macron has been a transformative president, and I think, like everybody, he had part of the Epstein network around him. I think Jacques Lang has kind of a Soviet flavor to him. It's not my country, so I want to be very careful about giving out opinions, because I'm not in the disinformation business to affect other people's elections. The French, trust me, the French are really good at discussing politics at dinner amongst themselves. So, and Jacques Lang has been around a long time in France, so he'll be discussed. But I think in general, though, to merge this with the last question about the shadow government, France has a shadow government sitting there too. And the sudden revelations about Jack Lang and Epstein isn't further exposure. I think exposure is better than impeachment. Let's just talk about who does what. See if I missed any questions. I'm gonna peek over on Twitter there, which I have to say has been a lot spicier for me ever since we started mentioning the Russians again. It's like, there we go. This is Twitter classic for me. We're going to talk about some Russians. Congregant of the Church of Mighty Demon Rats says, "Who the fuck are these people?" I don't know who you mean by that, but I think that could be applied to everyone involved. See if we have any more Twitter-based questions here. No, who the fuck are these people? Which is a question we ought to add there. So corporate media has always been a tool for the wealthy. Well, what else did you do with your money? It makes sense there. So predictions going forward. We have a lot happening in the next few weeks. The Clintons are apparently going to appear for their depositions at the end of the month, I think the 27th. They tried to make it seem like they didn't have to show up for congressional hearing when subpoenaed. But our friend Steve Bannon proved, and Peter Navarro, they proved that that if you don't, you'll go to jail. And remember, those guys appealed their convictions, and I believe created precedent case law that is now being used to trap the Clintons. The Clintons have to answer what their relationship to Jeffrey Epstein was. That's supposedly going to happen in a few days there. So about 3 weeks. Ghislaine will be in on Monday. And I think you can see what's been set up, where this is a tiny amount of information. There's 3 million files that have been released by the DOJ, but it could be 6 or 10. And there's just so much more to come. And during this period of time, you're going to have more meltdown of the Russians abroad. The Chinese have kind of agreed to behave in certain ways. We've taken out Venezuela. It looks like the Iranian regime is not long for this world. Neither is the Cuban regime. America is making its influence felt here. It's very interesting. And into that, we will be exposing yet more people who were part of this network. And it's going to it's going to be seen, I think, as a shadow government of some form. And either way, I hope we have free and fair digital platforms and freedom in our country to bring up different topics in different tribunals in different areas, under oath and not under oath, and just talk to each other as fellow citizens, where we can understand who are these people who are acting so badly and what are the implications of their actions. So this was a great session. Thank you. I will see you again soon. And click like, subscribe, leave more comments. See you on Twitter and all that. Eric Garland, Game Theory Today. Thanks a lot.